This all unfolded on New Year's Eve in 2019. I was from a small town just outside Buffalo, and I'd been counting down the days to get back home after wrapping up a challenging semester at the University of Vermont. The semester had been unusually grueling, with finals overlapping my part-time job and personal commitments. By the time classes ended, I felt like I had nothing left to give, mentally, emotionally, or even physically. The last week had been particularly lonely, as personal reasons forced me to stay back at school while everyone else left for the holidays. Christmas came and went in deafening silence, marked only by a takeout pizza and reruns of holiday movies I didn't have the energy to enjoy. The flight home was uneventful, but it felt like the universe wasn't in the mood to make things easier. My mood had already hit rock bottom before I even boarded the plane. I just watched my lifelong favorite team, the Jets, lose their final game of the season, officially earning the title of a winless team with an abysmal 0-17 record. To say it stung would be an understatement. It was the kind of gut-wrenching disappointment only a die-hard fan could understand, an inexplicable loyalty tested to its limits. As if that wasn't bad enough, my flight ended up delayed by 2 hours, completely ruining our carefully laid plans. Originally, my parents and I were supposed to head straight to my aunt's house for her annual New Year's Eve bash. It's a family tradition, a mix of noise, laughter, and enough food to feed a small army. Missing out wasn't an option, but my delay forced my parents to leave without me. They took the main car, loaded with casseroles and party gifts, leaving me to fend for myself. All I had was the old spare car that had seen better days. My mom, ever the peacemaker, tried to soften the blow by leaving Luna, our Labrador, behind to keep me company. Luna had always been a source of comfort, her goofy antics and warm presence a surefire remedy for bad days. I wasn't exactly thrilled about making the trip solo, but knowing she'd be by my side made it feel a little less daunting. By the time my taxi finally pulled up in front of the house, the clock was edging close to 9:30 p.m. The air was crisp and biting, a stark reminder of Buffalo winters. Snow blanketed the driveway and the edges of the front yard, glistening faintly under the dim porch light. I wasted no time. Dragging my luggage inside, I threw it haphazardly near the entrance. Unpacking wasn't even a consideration. I grabbed the essentials, my phone charger, a jacket, and the house keys, and headed to fetch Luna from the backyard, where she was happily digging through a patch of untouched snow. Her wagging tail and playful bark brought the first genuine smile to my face that day. With Luna safely in the passenger seat, I double-checked the locks on the front door. The familiar creak of the house as it settled in the cold night almost made me second-guess leaving, but the pull of family and tradition was too strong to ignore. Luna, sensing the excitement, hopped around the seat, her paws leaving faint traces of snow on the old upholstery. I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head at her boundless energy. She had a way of lightening even the heaviest of moods. The drive ahead was nothing out of the ordinary. A straight shot down the highway, a route I'd driven countless times before. The only difference this time was the eerie quiet that settled over me. Normally, my parents' chatter or the car stereo playing our favorite tunes would fill the silence. But tonight it was just me, Luna, and the rhythmic hum of the engine. The car itself felt like a time capsule, a relic of my high school years, with faded seat covers and an old air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror. Despite its age, it started on the first try, its heater groaning to life as the cabin slowly filled with warmth. As I pulled out of the driveway, a fleeting thought crossed my mind. Was this how I wanted to end the year? Alone, rushing to make it to a party I'd barely have time to enjoy? The thought lingered for a moment before I pushed it aside. Luna's excited bark snapped me back to reality, and I focused on the road ahead. The snowflakes swirling in the car's headlights looked almost magical, though I knew the slick roads beneath them were anything but. I adjusted my grip on the wheel, my knuckles tightening instinctively. The world outside was quiet, almost unnervingly so. Most people were already tucked away in their homes, preparing to ring in the new year with loved ones. The occasional house I passed had its windows glowing warmly, silhouettes of families moving inside, and the faint twinkle of Christmas lights still adorning the eaves. It was a picturesque scene, but it only emphasized my own solitude. Yet, there was a strange comfort in it, too. A reminder that the world moves on no matter how chaotic life feels. Halfway down the highway, I glanced over at Luna. She had settled into her usual spot, curled up with her head resting on the armrest, her eyes half closed but still alert. I reached over to scratch her behind the ears, her fur soft and warm against my fingers. "It's just you and me tonight, girl," I murmured, and her tail thumped lightly in response. The journey felt longer than it actually was, every mile stretching out as I replayed the events of the past few weeks in my mind. The missed Christmas, the crushing jet's loss, the delayed flight. It all swirled together into a haze of frustration and exhaustion. But somewhere amidst the chaos, a tiny part of me held onto the hope that the night wasn't entirely lost. Maybe, just maybe, the universe had something else in store for me before the year ended. The drive wasn't particularly remarkable, just miles of winding back roads cutting through Vermont's quiet countryside. The kind of roads that seemed to stretch endlessly, lined with skeletal trees dusted with snow. The night sky above was a blank canvas, cloaked in impenetrable darkness, with only my headlights carving a narrow path forward. Occasionally, the dim glow of farmhouse porches flickered in the distance, their lights barely visible through the haze of frost clinging to my windshield. The world outside felt desolate, an empty silence enveloping everything except for the hum of the engine. About halfway through, Luna began whining. At first, I dismissed it as her usual restlessness, thinking she was bored and wanted attention. But when her soft whines escalated into anxious pacing in the passenger seat, I realized she needed a break. Her paws tapped rhythmically on the dashboard, her nose pressed against the cold glass as if urging me to stop. I sighed, reluctant to delay my already late journey, but her persistence left me no choice. I pulled over at the first clearing I spotted, a modest patch of land just big enough for the car. The engine's rumble faded as I turned off the ignition, plunging us into an oppressive quiet. The air outside was biting, each breath forming visible clouds that quickly dissipated. I jammed my hands deep into the pockets of my jacket and stepped out, the crunch of snow beneath my boots echoing faintly in the stillness. Luna bounded out after me, her tail wagging with excitement as she sniffed the frosty air. The clearing was surrounded by dense woods, their skeletal branches stretching upward like claws scraping at the night sky. The darkness was unsettling, an almost tangible void that seemed to swallow the weak glow of my car's parking lights. Luna, unfazed by the cold or the gloom, darted toward the trees, her nose glued to the ground as she explored. I stood near the car, my breath hitching in my chest, trying to shake the feeling that the shadows were watching. That's when I heard it, a loud, deliberate crashing sound deeper in the woods. It wasn't the kind of noise you'd expect from a small animal scurrying through the brush. This was heavier, deliberate, like something large forcing its way through the trees. My heart jumped, a sharp spike of adrenaline coursing through me. My instincts screamed to get back in the car, but before I could act, Luna froze. Her ears perked up, her body stiffening as she stared into the darkness. "Luna, come here," I called out, my voice shaky and too loud in the eerie quiet. But she didn't budge. Her tail stopped wagging, and in an instant, she bolted, a streak of white fur disappearing into the forest. "Luna, no, stop," I shouted, my voice cracking as panic gripped me. I fumbled for the flashlight I'd kept in the car, my frozen fingers struggling to switch it on. A weak beam of light flickered to life, illuminating only a few feet ahead. The crashing noise sounded again, louder this time, and my stomach churned. Whatever was out there wasn't small, and it wasn't far. I hesitated for a moment, my body torn between chasing after Luna and staying by the car. The thought of leaving her alone in the woods, terrified and vulnerable, pushed me into motion. I stepped into the forest, the beam of my flashlight trembling as it cut through the shadows. The cold seemed to intensify as I moved further in, the trees pressing closer together, their bare branches forming a maze that felt impossible to navigate. "Luna," I called again, my voice echoing faintly in the vast emptiness. The sound of her barking reached me, sharp and frantic, coming from somewhere up ahead. Relief mingled with dread as I quickened my pace, my boots sinking into the uneven ground. The snow here was deeper, crunching loudly with every step and masking any other sounds around me. The crashing noise came again, closer now, and my flashlight caught movement in the corner of my eye. I whipped the beam toward it, only to find the shadows shifting, playing tricks on my already frayed nerves. My breathing grew heavier, each exhale a visible puff in the freezing air. The forest seemed alive, its stillness replaced by an unnerving energy that set my skin crawling. Finally, I spotted Luna. She was standing near a fallen tree, her body rigid and her fur bristling. Her barking had stopped, replaced by a low growl that sent chills down my spine. "Luna, come on, let's go," I said, trying to sound calm even as my voice shook. She didn't move, her eyes fixed on something just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I followed her gaze, my stomach tightening as I aimed the beam toward the darkness ahead. For a moment I saw nothing. Then, faintly, the outline of something large began to take shape. It was too far to make out clearly, but the sheer size of it was unmistakable. It moved slowly, deliberately, its bulk shifting between the trees with an unnatural grace. My chest tightened, and every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab Luna and get out of there. But my legs felt rooted to the spot, the weight of fear pinning me down. The figure paused, its outline blending with the shadows as if it had noticed me. Luna let out another low growl, her body tense and ready to spring. The air around us felt heavier, charged with an unspoken threat that I couldn't shake. My hand tightened around the flashlight, the beam trembling as I took a step back. "Luna, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I reached for her collar, my fingers brushing against her fur. She didn't resist as I tugged her gently, my eyes never leaving the dark silhouette. Whatever it was, it didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting. The only sound was the faint rustle of branches swaying in the icy wind. With Luna now by my side, I began to back away slowly, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Every step felt like an eternity, the weight of the unseen presence pressing down on me. The figure didn't follow, but its stillness was somehow more terrifying. It wasn't until I reached the clearing and saw the faint glow of the car's lights that I dared to turn my back. I practically shoved Luna into the passenger seat, slamming the door behind her before scrambling into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and I didn't waste a second. The tires skidded briefly on the snow before finding traction, and I sped away, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Luna sat quietly beside me, her usual exuberance replaced by an unsettling calm. Whatever we'd encountered in those woods, it was something I never wanted to face again. Panic set in immediately, gripping my chest like a vice. Luna was still out there, and every passing second felt like an eternity. Her name escaped my lips again and again, but the forest swallowed my voice. The cold air cut like shards of glass as I stumbled deeper into the trees, my phone's weak flashlight casting trembling shadows that danced ominously across the snow-covered ground. Every breath I took burned, the cold slicing through my lungs, but I couldn't stop. Not until I found her. I pushed forward, my boots crunching loudly against the frozen ground, the sound echoing eerily in the silent woods. The skeletal branches above seemed to close in, their gnarled shapes looming like specters against the pitch-black sky. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. I kept calling her name, my voice growing hoarse with desperation. Each second stretched endlessly, the fear of what could happen to her gnawing at my resolve. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my flashlight caught a glimmer of movement. Luna. Relief surged through me as I spotted her crouched low beneath a tangle of branches. Her entire body trembled, her tail tucked tightly between her legs, and her usually bright eyes were clouded with fear. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the sting of the icy ground, and reached out to her. "It's okay, girl. I'm here," I whispered, my voice shaking as I pulled her close. She pressed into me, her body quivering with terror. Whatever had scared her wasn't just her imagination. I held her tightly, trying to steady both her breathing and my own, but the weight of the situation crashed over me. We weren't safe, not yet. The forest was unnervingly quiet now, as if holding its breath. My flashlight beam scanned the trees, searching for any sign of movement, but the shadows seemed to mock me, shifting just beyond my reach. I forced myself to stand, my knees buckling slightly under the weight of my fear. "Come on, Luna. Let's get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She stuck close to my side, her usual exuberance replaced by a tense, almost primal need to escape. We hadn't made it far when the sound returned. The crashing, louder now, more deliberate. Each heavy impact against the undergrowth sent a jolt of adrenaline surging through me. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. A deer? A bear? But deep down, I knew this wasn't an animal. This was something else, something that didn't belong in the natural order of things. "Keep moving," I muttered to myself, my voice trembling as I quickened my pace. Luna darted ahead, her movements sharp and purposeful, as if she knew exactly where to go. I followed her lead, the crashing growing closer with every step. My flashlight flickered, the weak beam faltering as the battery began to wane. Panic flared again. The darkness pressed in around us, suffocating and absolute. The trees blurred together as I broke into a sprint, my legs burning with the effort to keep up. Branches clawed at my jacket, and the uneven ground threatened to trip me at every step, but I couldn't stop. The crashing was right behind us now, each impact shaking the ground as if it were alive. I didn't dare look back, the primal fear of what I might see propelling me forward. Somehow, through sheer luck or perhaps Luna's uncanny sense of direction, we burst into the clearing. The faint glow of the car's parking lights was like a beacon, cutting through the oppressive darkness. Luna reached the car first, her paws skidding on the icy ground as she scrambled to a halt. I wasn't far behind, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I threw myself against the door. My frozen fingers fumbled with the handle, but I managed to yank it open. "Get in," I yelled, my voice cracking with urgency. Luna didn't hesitate, leaping into the passenger seat with a desperation that mirrored my own. I slammed the door shut behind her, my hand trembling as I jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, its familiar hum a lifeline in the chaos. My headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the trees ahead, but I didn't stop to see if anything was following. Throwing the car into reverse, I spun the wheel and skidded back onto the road. The tires struggled for traction on the icy surface, but I didn't care. My only focus was putting as much distance as possible between us and whatever was out there. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and my heart thundered in my chest like a drumbeat. Luna sat silently beside me, her usual exuberance gone. She stared out the window, her ears twitching at every sound, her body still trembling. I reached over with one hand, brushing her fur gently in an attempt to calm her. "It's okay now," I murmured, though the words felt hollow. Was it really okay? Or had we narrowly escaped something far worse than I dared to imagine? The road ahead stretched on, empty and cold, but I didn't slow down. Every shadow cast by the headlights felt like a threat, every gust of wind against the car's frame a sinister whisper. My mind replayed the events in an endless loop, searching for answers I didn't have. What had we stumbled upon? What had been out there in the woods watching, following? As the minutes turned into miles, the crashing noise finally faded, swallowed by the distance and the hum of the engine. But the fear lingered, a heavy weight in my chest that refused to lift. Luna curled up on the seat, her head resting on her paws, but her eyes remained open, watching me as if to say, "Don't stop. Keep going." And so I did, the dark forest shrinking in my rearview mirror, leaving behind more questions than answers. The safety of home felt a lifetime away, but one thing was certain, we had survived. Barely.